So you recently added to NVIDIA. When we have analysts talking about, the cost of catching up, it seems, as I said, implicit they're talking about NVIDIA, the cost it's going to take to try and catch up, maybe not all the way to NVIDIA, but at a place to be certainly more competitive.
Yeah, that's a tall order. I mean, so first of all, I think, Dr. Lisa Su is amazing, so I would never discount her. And actually the revenue guide was like 7.5 versus 7.54. And they even said plus or minus 300. So to me, it's just like sentiment was coming in wanting a big number. Obviously, the gaming was weak. But I do think that this whole catch-up trade, just in general, if you think about it, NVIDIA is also cannibalizing themselves with creating faster, bigger GPUs like Blackwell. And there will be a point when these big cloud service providers go from training to inference, and then all of a sudden, do they need all that compute? And so I think this catch-up trade, I'm not so sure about that, because by the time they catch up, well, we need all of these chips or GPUs anyway. And so I think the market has sniffed this out. It's up, what, 2% for the year? Versus NVIDIa's up, what, 160?
Barely. Well, so we're going to show you. Yeah. I'm sorry. As you finish making your point, Brent. Excuse me for jumping in. We're trying to put together right now the stock by stock look year to date on AMD versus NVIDIA. So excuse me, but continue as we throw that up.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, take AMD as its own company. They do different things. There is crossover, but as it relates to AI spend, the GPUs and Blackwells rests squarely with NVIDIA. It's just like it is what it is. And so I just don't think that catch-up is actually sound mathematically.
There you go. I mean, if that doesn't tell the story, I don't know, Jason Snipe, what does. You tell me, because you own NVIDIA and you own Qualcomm, you don't own AMD.
Right.
That's not a very compelling story that you need to. I don't necessarily think.
At all, Scott. I mean, obviously the price action tells a story without a doubt. And I think, it was clearly a light guide. It was a messy quarter. I mean, beat on the top and bottom, whatever. But the guidance wasn't great. And I think when you go back to ASML, and their earnings, which were messy as well, and then you saw what happened with Taiwan Semi, which I know is Weiss's stock, which was blowout. It just goes to show you that there are a few companies that are really, really winning here. And NVIDIA, like we always say, the Beltway and the interstate rides all the way through NVIDIA. And I think that's why a lot of folks own it.
Weiss?
I mean, let's call this for what it is, okay? You've got a stock that came into the quarter at 80 times trailing PE, which is almost a third higher than what NVIDIA was. They don't have the same growth rate. They're still more expensive than NVIDIA today, and they're more expensive next year. So what were people thinking? This is purely a momentum trade. I don't care how great a CEO Lisa Su is. I have no reason to believe she's not. I do respect her and like her, and this isn't her fault. Now, her fault may be catching the GPU wave a little late, right? But CPUs are still important. But the point is, it was asinine to own this stock at that valuation when you've got NVIDIA selling at a lower valuation. They're both overpriced. I own NVIDIA. But I don't know what went through people's minds, and we'll talk about maybe a healthcare company similarly positioned like this. It still makes no sense in AMD.
Well, let's get to two things. Let me ask you before I get to Meta then, since you brought up the beneficiaries of the spend. What's going on with AMD? You own that.
Yeah.
That stock's having a terrible day. It's trying to play catch-up, I think is fair to say. What's your own view for somebody who actually owns this stock?
Yeah, so the debate internally is AMD, if you weren't looking at the results from NVIDIA and others, is doing really quite well. It's growing nicely. The growth is reaccelerating. They upped their targets for their AI data center business. However, those expectations today are much lower than they were at the beginning of the year. And the expectations for next year are still lower than they were at the beginning of the year. In other words, AMD is expected to be a huge winner. Right now, it's a winner, but you've got other places that seem to be winning the battle there.
But I mean, as long as it's compared to NVIDIA in the near term,
right,
that's the potential problem moving forward, right? It's
right.
A problem until it's not.
Correct.
But I mean, the outlook, when do you have an idea that you really think that AMD can be a viable competitor to NVIDIA? Because that's what the market seems to only care about.
Well, one of the challenges that they have is NVIDIA itself is a tremendous competitor. So NVIDIA's next generation of chips is talking about leapfrogging again. And there's kind of a fear, like, frankly, AMD's seen it before long ago. Remember when it was a competitor to Intel but never really could gain market share? It lived in that sort of middle land for decades. So we'll see in the next year, I think, whether or not AMD can start to gain back share against NVIDIA. But for now, it remains sort of a second source supplier. And the fear is that NVIDIA, not only ramping up the technology, but improving supply, may sort of cap AMD's near-term opportunity.
I mean,
All right, I hope you're all doing great today. The S&P finished the day down about 0.3%, and NVIDIA finished the day down nearly 1.4%. Microsoft and Meta both reported earnings today, and Google reported yesterday. I haven't had time to go through Microsoft and Meta's earnings in their entirety, but I will just say that based on what I've seen thus far, everything appears to be fine regarding growth in AI, and both Microsoft and Meta's commitments to increasing CapEx spending on AI. I just heard on the Microsoft earnings call that they expect CapEx to increase on a sequential basis based on their AI and cloud signals, and they expect Azure growth acceleration in the second half of the fiscal year compared to the first half. That is great news for NVIDIA. Now tomorrow we get Amazon and Apple's earnings. Both of these earnings reports will be important for the overall market, but between the two of them, Amazon's earnings will be the more important of the two for NVIDIA. The ideal scenario would be that Amazon reiterates their commitment to investing in AI and increasing CapEx spending. If that happens, then we will have gotten through yet another earnings season with confirmation from each of the hyperscalers that they are increasing CapEx spending on AI. I want to reiterate that I am bullish on NVIDIA over the next 1 to 2 years. And on that note, I want to remind you all that NVIDIA doesn't really have any competitors right now, and they will not have to worry about competitors for some time. As Jensen Huang explained recently on the BG Squared podcast, NVIDIA develops across the entire stack, hardware, software, networking, etc. And so even if a competitor comes out with a chip that has more flops than NVIDIA's, that's great, but it doesn't really matter to NVIDIA because the chip is just one component of the entire platform. And NVIDIA is focused on improving efficiency in every component of the platform, not just the chip. With this in mind, I think it's safe to say that NVIDIA's competitive moat should stand for quite some time. They are many years ahead of their competition. We also have a clear product roadmap from NVIDIA for the next 2 years. This year, we get the launch of Blackwell, then Blackwell Ultra in 2025, and later on, Rubin is scheduled to arrive in 2026. As long as everything remains peaceful in the Pacific, and as long as none of the hyperscalers significantly reduce their CapEx spending on AI, then I think NVIDIA should be just fine for at least the next 1 to 2 years. Really quick, I want to remind you of a few important upcoming dates for NVIDIA. NVIDIA's next AI Summit is scheduled for November 12th through the 13th in Tokyo. CEO Jensen Huang is scheduled to speak at the AI Summit on November 13th. I would be surprised if Jensen mentions very much about the demand for Blackwell or the production ramp of Blackwell, because NVIDIA will be in a quiet period ahead of their next earnings report. But we will see what happens. And after the AI Summit, we have NVIDIA's next earnings report on November 20th after market close. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for watching these videos. And with that, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.